Hi there. Anyone there? If you are, type a note so I can say hi to you and talk with you personally before we get started. If you're joining just now, then please introduce yourself. We have a bit of time to have a private conversation if you're there. I know most people join a little late, so that's all right. I'm just checking to see if anyone is putting anything out there. I'm not seeing any comments yet. You have me all to yourself. Okay, we're at 8 o'clock on the dot, so I expect some attendees in about 5 minutes. It takes a little while to have everyone come in, so if you want to say hello personally or ask me a question right now, that's fine too. And even if there's only a few of us on the call, we'll have a great conversation. This is the third week in a row that I've done this, so I think a lot of people have already come and may not be coming again, so that's all right too. I thought I'd try it though. I really do enjoy having you all here, so I thought I'd try it again. Let's see what happens. Hey, Mark. Hey, welcome. I'm glad you're here. We're getting a little bit of a late start because, of course, people generally don't come until after 8. I think most people don't come on until exactly the right time, but I tried to get here a few minutes early. Hey, Marty. Yes. Oh, thank you. Marty is saying he enjoyed Healing Our World, and I see that Braden Lacefield has also joined us. This is great. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about doing these Facebook events. It's a great way for me to visit with you all and not even have to leave my office. So, you know, feel free to say hi or make a comment or ask a question. We're going to probably, I'm going to wait till about 8:05 or so to get really started because a lot of people come in right at 8 because I think most people don't come in until then that are doing these. So I want to be sure that we have most of the people here before I get started. But I can certainly answer questions in the meantime, or just chit-chat with those of you who have made it here so far. And the nice thing about this early time is we can have a more personal conversation. Yeah. So there's several here. And again, I'm just going to wait a few more minutes. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to say hi, please do, or ask me a question. Rachel is saying she enjoyed my interviews with Tom Woods and Lions of Liberty and has pre-ordered the book. Yes, thank you very much. I'll talk a little bit about the book once we get started, just for those who hadn't heard anything yet, but you don't have to just ask me about the book. And Marty's asking, what type of regulation do I think is necessary to control snake oil? So I'm going to take that question first once I do my intro, Marty, because that's actually a really fun topic to talk about. Okay, and Braden is also asking me, if I believe Carly Fiorini is a friend of Liberty. I actually have to say I don't know as much about her as I probably should. I've sort of been in cloister writing this book, so I've kind of been out of it. You might have to educate me a little bit. Rick is saying, how are the pre-sales going? So I'll talk a little bit about that. The pre-sales are going well. They aren't going quite as much as I'd have liked, but you know, I realized I set a very high target. So we'll see how it goes. Tuesday we'll be inputting all the orders on Amazon. And since it's, I've got one more minute before it's 8:05, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the book to start with. I'll be very brief, and then I'll start answering questions, and I'll start with the snake oil questions. That'll be good. So I'm really glad you're all here, and yeah, it's 8:05. I'm going to go ahead and get started and just talk a little bit about the new book, Death by Regulation. Its official release date is on April 10th. And what we're doing is we're asking everyone who wants a copy of the book to order at deathbyregulation.us before the 10th. And if you do that, you'll get $60 worth of free gifts. And as you can see, I've put a little note up at the top of the screen that says deathbyregulation.us, so you know where to go. If you forget what I just said, you can just look at the top of the screen. And Death by Regulation is been in, I should say, has a foreword written by Ron Paul, has a preface written by Jonathan Wright, who's a big healthcare expert, and the afterword is written by Foster Gamble, who is the one who created the movie Thrive. What in the world will it take? And he's also a libertarian, and he's actually thinking about making Thrive 2. This is what it will take. And he will be bringing in more libertarian principles. At least that's the hope. And he may even interview me. So you never know how that's going to go. Anyhow, so Death by Regulation it's about the 1962 amendments to the Food and Drug Act, which are metastasizing every day because they really were open-ended. And what they are is they're regulations that are influencing our medical paradigm, shifting us from inexpensive prevention with supplements and things of that nature to expensive treatment with pharmaceutical drugs. It's also reshaped the pharmaceutical industry, and I was in the industry when this was happening and saw how these regulations were really inhibiting innovation. About 50 to 80% of our innovation has been lost because of these regulations. And also it's changed the timeline to get a drug from the lab bench to the marketplace. It used to be 4 years before the amendments, but now it's closer to 12 to 14 years, depending on the drug. So a lot of people die waiting. And you can actually calculate how many people die waiting and have lost their lives due to innovation. It's a conservative estimate, but it's about, basically, each of us have lost about 5 to 10 years of our lives to these amendments. And they've really increased the price of drugs. The price of drugs is not driven by greed, as most people think, but it's actually driven by the cost of meeting these regulations. I have a graph in my book that shows a very tight correlation between what we pay at the pharmacy for brand name drugs and our regulatory costs. And of course, consequently, you know, there's a lot of people who are very upset with this. Just to give one brief little story, when the AIDS patients were suffering and needing treatment, we were trying to get drugs out to them, but by the time the FDA gave us permission, us meaning the pharmaceutical company where I was at the time, I'm no longer with them, you know, basically every AIDS patient in the country who wanted the drug had already had it, and what they had done is they had hired black market chemists to make them and distributed it throughout the AIDS community, and I would say in a very safe way. So by the time the FDA gave us permission, everyone who wanted the drug had it, and they were resistant, and we had to wait for new people to be diagnosed. So, and if you watch the award-winning movie Dallas Buyers Club, you saw this in action. The FDA actually went after some of these buyers clubs, not all of them, but some of them, and really prosecuted and persecuted these poor, sick people. So it's very sad. So I'm going to kind of stop there and just remind everyone that if you do order before April 9th or on April 9th, that you can get $60 worth of free gifts. And then on April 10th, what we're going to do, my team and I, we're going to enter all the orders at once on Amazon. And the idea is to shoot Death by Regulation up to the Amazon bestseller list. And the reason we want to do that is then Amazon will advertise it to non-libertarians. And hopefully we'll get a lot of attention for the fact that bad law can be as deadly as bad drugs, and maybe get something done about it. And there's a lot of initiatives right now trying to reform the FDA, because people are starting to realize that the FDA is killing them, not because it's a mean, evil organization, but because the incentives are wrong. And we can talk about that a little bit if you have that in your questions. But I already have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to try to get back to working on the questions. I had one about snake oil, and I wanted to go ahead and get to that. So Marty was asking, what type of regulation do you think is necessary to control snake oil? Well, actually, let me tell you, Marty, it's kind of interesting, because snake oil actually had a lot of health benefits. It was sold in the U.S., probably most of it was rattlesnake oil, but snake oil is a supplement that's used in China and some other Asian countries. And the reason it was used, it was very similar in many ways to fish oil, had a lot of the same benefits. In fact, when they've done animal studies on rattlesnake oil or other types of snake oil and compared it to fish oil, some of the same benefits are there, but snake oil has something extra. We're not sure what it is yet. So actually snake oil probably was beneficial if people weren't taking cod liver oil, which was the way they got fish oil in those days. So it wasn't, you know, it's kind of interesting when I read about people are afraid they're going to get snake oil. Well, actually, it was probably good for them. But I think what you're really asking is, how do we prevent fraudulent things coming to market, things that aren't effective, that are sold to us, and we've wasted our money on them? Well, actually, that happens today. Most drugs don't work for everybody. Maybe they work for, depending on the drug, somewhere between 25 and 75% of the people who take them. There's always people that the drugs don't work for, and those people waste their money, of course. And then there's people the drugs do work for. In fact, there's people that placebo works for. So, you know, there's really no such thing as an ineffective drug, because there's always a placebo effect with drugs. And what happened before the 62 amendments, which actually demanded that there be a lot of effectiveness testing, was that the marketplace pretty much decided what was effective and what wasn't. The ineffective drugs really lost market share and were taken off the market by their manufacturers. So much so that when studies were done pre and post amendment to see, you know, if the amendments actually did what they were supposed to do and produce more safe and effective drugs, what they found was that the effectiveness in most studies was no different. In one study, I think there was about 10% increase in effectiveness after the amendments, which is really small when you consider that the price, the cost of drugs has gone up about 40-fold because of the amendments. So that's quite a difference. And safety isn't different either. When you look at, if you look before the amendments, you saw that about 2.5% of the drugs that were approved by the FDA were eventually withdrawn for side effects. And with the post-amendment, it was about 3.3%. So it didn't go down at all. It probably didn't really go up. Those numbers probably aren't really different, but it certainly didn't go down. And the reason is that mostly unsafe drugs get to the market because we just don't have enough knowledge. And so we test them in small numbers of people relative to the numbers who will take them once it gets to market. And once it gets to market, people who are genetically different or maybe have a different environment than the people who were originally tested, you know, there's such a difference in our population that some people will react badly. There is no such thing as a safe drug for everyone. People are allergic to things. You know, for example, when penicillin came out, it saved lives. But on the other hand, people were allergic to it and died. And this is really pretty much the case for all drugs. So there really isn't any way to totally prevent an ineffective drug from getting to market because all drugs are ineffective in some people. It's whatever, you know, so what's the criteria? If it saves 1 out of 10 people's lives, should it be on the market? If it lowers your blood pressure 10 millimeters in everyone, should that be on the market? You know, how do you decide what level of effectiveness that you want? And I think the best answer is the market really does a pretty good job of deciding. So I hope I answered your question, Marty. And Rick, I did answer your question about the pre-sales. They're going well, but I'd like them to go a little better. So, you know, if you're on today and you don't mind sharing the link that I have at the top of the page, deathbyregulation.us, please send your friends there. And Joshua's asking me, would I consider running for the 2020 LP nomination? Well, I'll tell you, Joshua, I think I'm really better suited to doing what I'm doing, which is writing and speaking about the problems we have. So if I ran for president, what would happen is that would engage me for, you know, the entire time, and I wouldn't have time to write. And that's one reason I haven't been running for anything lately, because I've been working on this book. And as you know, the kind of books I write generally tend to be pretty complex, and they take many, many hours, and I just can't do both anymore. So the answer to that, unfortunately, I know a lot of you want to see me run, but I don't have plans to run for 2020. And Braden is asking me, what is your opinion on the right to try legislation? Well, the right to try legislation is actually a spinoff from the court case. You know, I told you a little bit about the AIDS patients. Well, the cancer patients didn't want to go to the black market. They wanted to sue the FDA on the grounds that they had a constitutional right to try to save their lives. And so they should be able to take drugs at any stage of development if they were terminal. And the courts ruled that we have no constitutional right to save our lives with unapproved drugs. So right to try basically is that same lawsuit, except it's being passed state by the legislatures. It's been passed in at least 38 states. It's now being considered by the US Congress. And what it does is it allows terminally ill patients to negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical companies to get a supply of drugs that are in testing but are not yet approved by the FDA. It's been wonderful because it's brought attention to the fact that people are dying while they're waiting for the FDA to approve these drugs. The Achilles heel in right to try, in my opinion, is that the drug has to stay in the FDA's good graces, even after it's, you know, been given to a patient that wants it for right to try. And the problem with that is companies will hesitate to do that because they don't want the FDA angry at them, because if the FDA gets angry, then what's going to happen? It's going to drag its feet on the approval. So I think that right to try will be helpful for a few people. But the big plus of right to try, in my opinion, is it's letting everybody know that there's a big problem here. Now, coming along soon from the Heartland Institute is free to choose medicine, which does not have that Achilles heel. Basically, what happens in free to choose medicine is once the drug gets to a certain point in its development, anyone can negotiate with the pharmaceutical company, can buy it, have it gifted, whatever the pharmaceutical company wants to do. But once it goes into the free to choose medicine track, the drug does not have to stay in the FDA's good graces. So what this means is that some pharmaceutical companies will probably choose to pretty much do most of their drugs through the free to choose medicine track. Now, it does have to get through phase 1 and 1 phase 2 study with the FDA. Phase 1 is safety, human safety. Phase 2 is effectiveness. So it does have to toe the line until it gets to that point. And it's possible the FDA will drag their feet on those studies somewhat, but it's a lot tougher to do than it would be in late stage development. So I think free to choose medicine might actually, how can I say, be a stepping stone to doing what I recommend in my book, Death by Regulation, which is to take the approval power away from the FDA and make it a certifying agency. So the FDA can give its opinion, but if you, as a patient, say, I want to take the drug anyway, then you would be able to do it if the FDA didn't have approval power. Oh, and Glenn is saying he loves healing our world. Thank you, Glenn, and thanking me for all my work with Liberty. Well, we each do what we can, and this is what I can do, so I do it. And I want to say I appreciate your comments, because I don't really make money on these books. They're so difficult. It costs so much in the editing and everything that I break even, basically. So really my motivation is to do what I can for the cause of liberty. And if I get discouraged and I hear comments like that, it really helps me. So thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, any thoughts on CBD oil? Rachel asks me. And yes, I do have thoughts on that. You know, before the Marijuana Tax Act, cannabis was, I think I'm freezing up a little. Let me shut something down here. I don't want to overstress my connection. There we go. Okay, so before the Marijuana Tax Act, cannabis was in what we call the Pharmacopoeia, which was a big book which talked about all the different drugs and formulations that doctors had available to them. And of course, marijuana was in there. Cannabis was in there. And I happen to be in touch with some of the people who, Steve Cuppy, for example, who many of you know. So, I mean, it's no secret. He actually helped get the first medical marijuana law passed in California, and is a cannabis patient. He's the first one, I think, that was allowed to legally have medical marijuana, and he's been growing a lot of different strains, and it's really wonderful because he's managed to, you know, get special strains for different things, and he has friends that are doing the same thing, and they're doing fantastic work. I really think it's a great thing. So yes, I think highly of that. Oh, Lorenzo, you came on. I just want to say hi. And let's see, Marty's asking me, what are my thoughts about the opioid crisis? And because now his wife is having problems, her doctor won't prescribe them anymore. Oh, yes, it's really bad, you know. So what would have been smarter, in my opinion, since we just talked about cannabis, would be if we had legal cannabis in every state. That would be used a lot for pain, I think, instead of the opioids. That would be a very simple way, I think, to really change the face of the opioid crisis. You know, because then patients will get what they need without having to take opioids. Now, of course, my personal belief, I don't have any data to back this up, so I'm kind of coming right out there saying my personal belief is one reason that so many people want to take opioids or cannabis or hard drugs is that life is kind of unfulfilling and frustrating, and people sense something's wrong. And as libertarians, we know what's wrong. You know, we act one way on a one-to-one basis. You know, if we were neighbors, of course, we'd be following the non-aggression principle with each other. But when we interact group to group, we start using aggression or encouraging the government to use aggression against our neighbors for our benefit. At least we think we benefit. Of course, those of you who have read Healing Our World know that I don't believe we do benefit, but at least not in the long run. But, you know, I think we have a lot of frustrated people out there because they sense something's wrong. I think the fact that Trump won the election was actually a vote against the establishment, not for Trump. And I think because people are so frustrated and, you know, they can't get jobs because the economy's been wrecked by government aggression and regulations, and again, they don't even know what's wrong. So there's a high level of frustration. And I think that's one of the reasons we have so many people turning to drugs and alcohol too. It doesn't have to be an illegal substance. Okay, Glenn is asking me, is there any place to get hard copies of the books at a discount if bought in bulk? And the answer is yes. If you go to my website, ruwart.com, RUWART.com, just like my name, you can go now and order Healing Our World and Short Answers at bulk rates. And if you have any problems, or you feel like maybe you're going to buy more than your choice on the website, just send me a note, preferably through my website, because I get so many emails. The ones from my website get flagged, and that helps me not think they're spam, you know, because I have to go through all these, and sometimes I screw up, and I don't want to miss your email. So I would do that. And Death by Regulation, I do have bulk prices for that, and I don't remember what they are at the moment because I only just set them a little while back. So just email me through my website, and I can give you all the lowdown. That's probably the best way to handle it. Okay, so Kevin's telling me that one of his psychiatrist friends indicated that most doctors are not members of the AMA, so he wants to know where it gets its authority. Well, you know, it's interesting because it used to be that most doctors were members of the AMA, but a lot of them have got very fed up with the lobbying efforts, I guess you could say, of the AMA. And the AMA was instrumental in pushing licensing regulation in the U.S., and it really changed the whole face of American medicine because basically they controlled how many doctors could be licensed. And they do this on a state-by-state basis. But, you know, there's the national office and everyone talks, and, you know, things get, how can I say it, colluded. They collude to keep the number of doctors low. And since we have so many more procedures and things that you can get, we actually have quite a bit of physician shortage here, and it's true of nurses too, and other healthcare professionals. And so we're importing a lot of people from overseas to make up for this. So where does it get its authority now? Well, it's because of its past history. It's nationally recognized, and it's a big lobbying group. So it has its authority through its lobbying power, which translates into funding the correct campaigns, as you all know. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So that's where it comes from. And of course, historically, they have a Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, which is a very prestigious research magazine, and so they wield a lot of clout through that as well. Oh, and David, I'm glad to see you've joined us. Okay, so Marty is asking, he wants to share this video with his wife. Will it be uploaded in the near future? Yes, it should appear on my Facebook pages, both my fan page, which is where you are now, and my personal page, where I already have so many friends I can't add anymore, so that's why I send people to my fan page. It should be on both of them probably sometime tomorrow. And if for some reason you don't see it, contact me through my website and I'll see that you get a copy. And Brent, thanks for joining us. Yeah, David's giving me a list of people whose shows I need to go on, and yes, I've contacted a lot of people, and some have responded and some haven't. But if you know any of these hosts personally, the best thing is when somebody who knows them personally or is a fan contacts them and says, hey, you gotta have this guest. And I'm happy to do shows. I'm going to be trying to do a lot of them even after the book launch, because of course that's not the end of it, it's just the beginning. So yeah, please keep your suggestions coming, because some of the people you're suggesting, I don't recognize their name, but I'll do some research and tell them that one of their fans suggested I come on board. Oh yes, and David's asking if having scientific inquiry run by the government is a bad idea. How can having an FDA with mandatory requirements ever be a good idea? Well, clearly it's not. We're all losing years of our lives to these amendments, and that's even if we're a regulator or a drug company executive or a scientist, a patient, a doctor, anybody. We're all losing 5 to 10 years of our lives, because if something hasn't been invented yet, you can't take it. Rothschild, the one who started the banking industry, basically, was the richest man in the world when he died, and he died of a simple infection, which could have been cured by penicillin, but it hadn't been discovered yet. So it doesn't matter how much money you have. If something hasn't been invented yet, you can't get your hands on it. And that's why we are losing so much of our lives to loss of innovation. And that's not just in the drug industry, that's in our prevention and supplement field as well. And that's all due to the amendments as well. I go through both of the cases there, and even medical practice has been influenced. Stem cell research, which is really the hope for those of us who are older, is being driven offshore because of the amendments. So it's really pretty sad. The only reason I can smile while I'm saying this is I think the research has shown conclusively how bad these regulations are, and that's something sometimes we have a hard time doing as libertarians, is demonstrating that. But now it's pretty clear, so I'm kind of excited about that aspect. And Susan says, do I know anything about St. John's wort as a treatment for mild to moderate depression? Well, I don't have any, how can I say this? I don't have any experience with it, and I haven't read all the studies, but I know some people who swear by it and others who say it doesn't work for them. But that's not unusual, because like every substance, it's going to act at a particular place in the chemical reactions that go on in your body, and depression can be caused by a number of them. So unless you're hitting the cycle in the right place, of course it won't work. So my feeling is that yes, it does seem to be something that a lot of people benefit from. So if that's helpful. Oh, and Susan, you indicated that my pre-order sales just went up by 1. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really hoping we can use what the research that's in death by regulation to make a difference here, with not just the FDA regulation, but with medical regulation, because medical regulation probably has the same costs. It's just state by state. This was an easy fix, an easy analysis, I should say, because it's national. So it makes it much easier to put it together. And Tony is saying, love your posts, keep up the great work. Well, I'm glad you do. I'm glad you like them. You know, that's, I haven't been a big social media person, but I got educated when I ran for the 2008 election, and afterwards when Lee Reitz was helping me with my social media. And I have help. I have to admit, I'm not doing it all myself. But I mentioned Lee because, as many of you know, he's left us. He's passed on. And I just want to acknowledge him because he really is the one who got me started in social media. I don't see any other questions at the moment, so I'll just, while I'm waiting for a few more to come in, I will just again mention that for those of you who might not have been here, there's a pre-sale on my new book, Death by Regulation, and you can learn about it and the $60 worth of free gifts you can get by pre-ordering it on or before April 9th. And you can go to deathbyregulation.us to find out more. That's deathbyregulation.us. What we're going to do is collect all these orders on April 10th. My team and I will enter them all at one time into Amazon. And the idea is to drive up the book on the Amazon bestseller list. And I know that some of you may have ordered right on Amazon, and that's okay too, because that's giving me valuable information. If you did that, and are wondering if you can get the free gifts, just again, send me an email through ruwart.com, ruwart.com, and I'll see that you get some credit for that. Okay, I'm not having any other questions right now, but if anyone has them, just type them in. I'll be happy to answer them. And if we run out of questions, we'll just go ahead and call it a night. But I know what happens here. After a few minutes, people think of other questions they want to ask. At least on the last two I did. Well, you know, while we're waiting for more questions, I want to mention something. I don't think I mentioned this on my last couple of podcasts. But one of the reasons I was excited about doing Death by Regulation is that I have another book in mind. I don't know if I have to take a break for a while, so I'm not sure how that will or when that will happen. But I was thinking of doing a book called Is Regulation Ethical? And the reason I was going to do that is I chair what's known as an ethical review board, which looks at all the material that human subjects get when they do a drug study and make sure that they are told everything they need to be told. The idea of ethics and an ethicist is something that we as libertarians need to get involved in, because you really don't necessarily need huge credentialing to be called an ethicist. And frankly, the ethicists that are working today and pulling down big bucks often don't know what they're talking about. I mean, for example, in the area of regulation, they talk about how much regulation we should have. No one ever asks the question, should we have it at all? And I bring this to your attention because actually, you know, libertarians are ethicists. That's really what we are. We used to use the term, you know, we used to say that liberty or libertarianism is moral. Today, you would say it's ethical. And that's something we're very good at, is analyzing what's going wrong in our society through government. And I think that if you get the opportunity to speak as an ethicist, or if you want to go online and get a little bit of training in that field and credential yourself a little bit, I think you can make a big difference, because the tough questions are not being asked any more than they are by our society as a whole. And all that debating we do as libertarians really pays off when you start thinking in terms of being an ethicist. So I just want to throw that out there and invite you to explore that as another way of trying to get the ideas of liberty out there. We're really in a great position to do that. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I don't know if you want to call it a night, or you want me to just talk in general, or what here. this is the third week in a row I've been on, so I think there's not quite as many people as we've had in the past. And I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something by not scrolling down, but it doesn't look like it. Okay. So I don't want to keep you all if I've answered all your questions, but I don't want to leave if I haven't and you've got something more to say. And I see that we're still getting some people joining here at the last minute. So, well, it's not really the last minute, but. So I do want to share one more thing with you too about death by regulation. I think it's probably going to be the best demonstration of how regulation harms us. But I know that when I go to the Texas Libertarian Party convention next weekend, there's going to be another gentleman there, a Dr. Kyle Varner, and he wants to talk about a book he's writing, which is on medical regulations in general, which is a much harder book because, as I said, those are state by state. But I just want to let you know about that because he and I are going to be doing we're going to be interviewing each other. So I just want to let you know that's coming. And when that happens, of course, we'll post on Facebook, so you'll know about that too. I think healthcare is going to be one of the trigger issues for us. Everybody's getting very concerned about it. They're concerned about pricing and about, as I said, about, well, if you want to be very conservative, 80% of what we pay at the pharmacy is due to these regulations that harm us instead of help us. And it's actually probably closer to 90 or 95%. I was being conservative when I said 80%. And so if you think about this applying to healthcare as a whole, you see immediately how healthcare costs can be slashed. And again, I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. And the reason is they haven't been able to put numbers on the cost of regulation. So that's what I'm hoping death by regulation will do. And what I'm hoping it will do is give us all a way to point to not just regulations in general, but specifically to healthcare. And maybe that's something that will wake the American people up. I'm hopeful because there's a lot going on FDA reform, and I think medical reform is coming down the pike too. I think that's going to be following all of the discussion about FDA reform. Okay, I'm not seeing more questions come up, so I'm going to go ahead and end in the next, let's see, it's 8:41 by my clock. I'm going to go to 8:45. We haven't gotten questions by then. I'm going to say goodnight because I don't want to keep you too long. But I'm going to, again, for the people who joined us late, just say that if you go to the link that I have up there, deathbyregulation.us, you can learn about my new book and the $60 worth of free gifts that you can get for pre-ordering. And the idea in the pre-ordering is so that if you order by April 9th, on April 10th, we can input all the orders into Amazon, hopefully get Death by Regulation in the ranks of Amazon bestseller, and in that case, Amazon will promote it for us to non-libertarians as well. Most of my promotion has been to libertarians, although some of it has gone into other areas. So I just wanted to, again, encourage anyone who hasn't gotten a copy yet and would like one to buy it during the pre-order. And that way you'll get the free gifts and we'll get, hopefully, a better ranking on Amazon. But again, if you order it later, or if you've got, we will continue to have some bonuses for those who order it later, but there won't be as many as there are when you order before April 9th. And it looks like we're probably going to end in a few minutes, so I just want to thank you all for coming. When I go to a convention, I'm always so busy. I never seem to have enough time to talk to you all. And I know you're out there because you email me and make comments on Facebook. And I just want to tell you how much I really, really appreciate all the support that you give me, because that's what keeps me going. You know, there's not really much money in writing books like this, but I feel like when I hear your comments about how you're using Healing Our World and giving it as a gift, for example, I know the word's getting out. I know that it's doing the job it needs to do, and that I'm doing the job I need to do, and that's what keeps me going. So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your support. I don't think that without that, I don't think I would have been motivated to write this last book, because it was a very difficult book to write. I had to really cloister myself for a couple of years to get it out, and so I guess I should say thank you. And I just wanted to make sure you knew how much I appreciated your support. I really do. So thanks so much. And I appreciate you coming here tonight and joining me in my office. You can see a little corner of my desk. Let's see. Yeah, I can't even point here because I'm opposite, but you can see a little corner of my desk, and I've got a lot to clean up now that Death by Regulation's done. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight to all of you. And again, thank you for coming. And we'll do this again sometime, probably not the next week, but I'll try to do this on a more regular basis in the future. So thanks for coming. Bye-bye.